Hey guys, this is Red and Blue, the channel on YouTube for all things PSG in English. Please subscribe. Today, the goalkeeper Donnarumma story is back on the front page and seems to be getting close to resolution. A lot of different information coming out in the media, both about Donnarumma and the status of his contract extension and the conversation going on between the club and the player. But also about the player who could be his replacement, Lucas Chevalier, the goalkeeper of Lille, who we've talked about before. So let me dive in and kind of take you through it and try to unplug what's reality from what's mercato fantasy and really try to see where we are. So Donnarumma, he's got a contract extension offer on the table that he's had for a while. In fact, he had agreed to the contract extension earlier this season before going back to it after all of the great Champions League performances. We are talking about him essentially changing the mix of his salary and decreasing the flat guaranteed part of his salary in exchange for more bonuses tied to his performance, the number of games he plays, and how well the team is performing. It is a new way of doing contract in Paris that Campos has been putting in place. Most of our players have been able to find a deal with the club to adopt this kind of contract. So if you remember earlier in the season, we extended the contract of Nuno Mendes, we extended Hakimi as well. So even players who were there before Luis Campos arrived and so had like the previous generation of contracts, we've been able to find a deal. Donnarumma has been a lot more complicated, and I think there's a couple of reasons for it. The first one is that he came with Leonardo when Leonardo was our sporting director on a free transfer from AC Milan, meaning at the time he managed to negotiate a very generous contract. And so, yeah, like it's, he's got a really high basis to work with. And I think in that context, PSG now is trying to be more rational with their finance and with the way they spend money. And so I think even if overall, like the amount actually probably match up somewhat, I definitely understand that there'd be like a difficult pill to swallow. And I think in general, and that's where I don't have obviously direct information or anything, but Donnarumma has this image, true or false, of being someone who's very mindful about the money, and that's why he left Milan back then, where he was, an academy player and the captain and kind of the new young star who was going to lead them on to better things, to join PSG because they couldn't offer him as much money, and so he decided to move. So we'll see at this point. The information that's coming out though is that when we had heard that the conversation was moving in a positive way in the past few weeks, and that progressively we were getting closer to resolution and both parties wanted to keep working together and so on and so forth. Now what we're hearing is that both parties, and especially PSG, are really not wasting time and really doing their work to make sure they're not cut short by any of it. And that's really the way I interpret it. So what we've heard is that PSG had started conversations with Lucas Chevalier and had also started conversation with Lille. And so, Lucas Chevalier is a 23-year-old goalkeeper of Lille. He's the hottest prospect, I think, in the world right now at the goalkeeper position. He's French. He's a substitute goalkeeper in the French national team. And he's someone who's impressed a lot, especially this season, and especially in some of Lille's Champions League game. So if you go back and look at Lille game against Real Madrid, against Atletico Madrid, even against Juventus, he had a few games where he was extremely solid and helped his team achieve really standout performances in the Champions League. And so he's really backed up his level of prospect, I guess, of hot prospect, with some performances that really, showstopper performances, in all honesty. At the same time, and that's where I add my caveat, there's two things. The first one is that we've said this before, but goalkeeper in PSG and goalkeeper in a mid-table or high table club, it's ultimately a very, very different job. PSG, in most of the games, you've got one stop to make, usually at the 95th minute. And yeah, you need to have high focus throughout the game, maintain your concentration, and then when that one realistic shot comes, you've got to save it. And if you save it, you've done your job. If you don't save it, you're a villain. You're the worst thing ever, and everyone is gonna pile up on you. So it's not like in a club like Lille. In a club like Lille, you make 12 saves a game. You can make a mistake here and there, and no one is going to jump on you. And so you have that room to not only perform but develop and try things and miss things, and it's a more forgiving environment in general. And then the second thing about Chevalier is that, from my perspective, I trust the voices out there who tell me that he's a great prospect and that he's got the potential to be the greatest goalkeeper of his generation and so on. That's what we're talking about, potentially the greatest goalkeeper of his generation. So fantastic. But at the same time, I remember the game against Lille that we played, where we scored 4 goals against them in the first half. I wasn't wowed. He wasn't a standout by any means. We scored 4 goals, of course, none of them were squarely on his shoulders or anything, but he didn't really have a standout performance against us either. And so, it's not surprising. He's a young goalkeeper, so he's still somewhat inconsistent. He's still developing. We've talked a lot about his distribution and his passing, and I think it's that game. It was good, but not really standout. And I think not necessarily 5 steps ahead of what Donnarumma can do. So it is a bet. Ultimately, I think that's what I'm getting at. It is a bet. It's clearly a player that has the potential to reach the level of a Donnarumma, but that's also clearly a player who's not there at this point. And so, we need to go into this with our eyes wide open and very conscious of that. And so, so the conversation is that we've been talking with him since, in the middle of the season, essentially at some point in the season. Luis Enrique has talked with him, and they've had a video call together where he explained, how he looks at his game and what he sees in him and how he wants to use him and what he expects and so on and so forth. Really convinced Lucas Chevalier. He's very, very keen based on that conversation, and he is making PSG his priority. So he's turned down a couple of English teams. I think Aston Villa and Man United checked in on him to see if he was open to moving. And he's essentially put a hold on that because he wants to see what's going on with PSG. So, that's great to hear. Obviously, we want players who are really willing to come play for us. And so, he seems to be fitting that mold. So conversations with him have been ongoing. The contract conversation seems to be going very well. And there's some people say there's already a deal in place. Most people say PSG and Chevalier have kind of agreed on the framework of the contract and the big elements of it. But there's still some details to work out. One way or the other, it seems that the conversation with him is going very, very well. And that, we could be already at a deal or very close to it. And then the second part of the conversation, which is interesting, is that it came out that PSG was already chatting with Lille about it, and that it was actually Nasser personally who was involved and talking with the owners of Lille directly. So really escalating way past Campos and Létang on Lille side. So if you remember, Lille president Olivier Létang was actually I think our part of Leonardo's team at some point, or one of our interim sporting director in PSG for a while. And he's a guy who's been around in French football for a while, very good at what he does, and very, very, very hard negotiator. So I'm not surprised that we try to circumvent that and go above his head, because otherwise it could be a much tougher conversation. And true to form, what we're hearing is that conversations and Lille might only be asking for 40 million euros, which is still a big price. But I think in the previous episodes, what Lille was saying is that they wanted 70 million euros for the player. So already we might have reduced his price almost by half. So it is what it is, and we'll have to see how those conversations go. But if we can get a very hot prospect and Luis Campos and Luis Enrique are in line, that is a good option, and we get him for 40 million euro. Ultimately we've got a substitute goalkeeper Safonov for 20 million euro. So 40 million euro for a really, really strong number one goalkeeper. Fine by me. And then the last piece I wanted to touch on, because I think it's interesting as well, and I'm a bit iffy about it, is that I've seen a lot of commentary and videos and tweets and so on that question the behavior of PSG with Donnarumma. And I think we should be open about this, and we should talk about this, because I think there's some points which are very true. And essentially the point that people are making is that offering Donnarumma a decreased salary is essentially a dishonest way of telling him that we want him out. And that, Luis Enrique had already made his decision, that he didn't like Donnarumma, and that he wanted a goalkeeper with the profile of Chevalier, which is essentially better with his distribution, better with his passing, even if it comes at a cost of a slight decrease in terms of reflexes and shot stopping on his line. Slight decrease, because Chevalier is still very strong in those areas, obviously. I'm honestly not so sure about this. I can see how that would be the perception. At the same time, it's been very, very well publicized that we're changing the way contracts are built. I think where I'm iffy is that I think in general, when we're on the outside, everyone has a tendency to just say oh, just give him what he wants. We've got money, we've got deep pockets, just give him what he wants and be done with it. And I've seen it with Zabarni as well, which has been going on forever. People say oh, just give Bournemouth 70 million. Who cares? We've got the money. We just did the Club World Cup and so on. And we've got the money. So who cares? And I think, if you're negotiating, you need to have that red line in place somewhere, that line in the sand that you're not willing to cross. And if you show over and over again that you're crossing it, it becomes meaningless. And then, all of a sudden, Zabarni is not 70 million, he's 90 million. And all of a sudden, Donnarumma is not willing to move an inch, he wants to increase his salary. And all of a sudden, all of the players that we're talking with ask 20% more. And that's kind of the situation that we were in previously, where we would give the players everything. And, ultimately, progressively, you get taken advantage of, I guess would be the best way to put it. So it's hard because we're talking about a player who helped us out massively during this Champions League campaign. We might not have won the Champions League without Donnarumma. If you remember, the penalty shootout in the Anfield against Liverpool. If you remember the stops that he made against Arsenal, there's been plenty of moments where he's really had top tier goalkeepers moments and stops that really could have made a difference for us. So we have to be conscious about this. Like I said, it looks like if he were to leave and Chevalier was to come, we would take a drop in terms of quality of goalkeeping, I think overall, and I think in some precise area of the game as well. But at the same time, it's always easy to sit on the sideline and say just spend the money when it's not yours and you're not part of the conversation. So yeah. In the end, did the club really from the get-go know that they would be keen to have a different sort of goalkeeper in place? Potentially. If they started talking with Chevalier mid-season, it kind of points that way. at the same time, like, yeah, we knew from the get-go that Donnarumma was always going to be a tough contractual conversation. And so, I would have very much blamed the club if we had ended up right now with no options, no plan B, no conversation, and Chevalier already on his way to Aston Villa. What would we have done then? So you can't really blame the club from being prepared and having a plan in place. And finally, I think like I'll close with this is that mercato is still unpredictable. There's still a meeting supposedly happening between Donnarumma and the club. And honestly, there's a relatively big part of me who's thinking, hey, is this all tactics from PSG to leak all of those informations? It's all coming out in French media as well, to leak all of those informations ahead of that meeting to try to put pressure on Donnarumma to sign the contract that we put in front of him. Because at the same time, the options for Donnarumma, honestly, at this point, are not stuff dreams are made of. Essentially, he had two on the table. One was Man City, one was Man United. Man City is finalizing 30 million euro on a goalkeeper that they want to bring back, so that might be off the table. And so Donnarumma is going to go to Man United, or actually Galatasaray made an offer. He's going to go to Galatasaray. Let's be serious, like due respect to both of those teams, but you don't move away from the Champions League winner to go to teams that don't even qualify or don't really have much of a hope of making it anywhere to near the later stage of the competition. So it could be very well a plan from PSG to say, hey, look, we're prepared. We've got options in place. And if that's the way you want to go, that's the way we're prepared to go. But also, think about it, because you don't have a lot of options on the table. Of course, you could, wait 1 year and leave on a free next year to get the money that you want. But we'll recruit Chevalier and you're not going to be playing for a year. It's a big one for a goalkeeper. Donnarumma, I think, is 25-year-old, 26-year-old at this point. So he's really reaching the peak years of his career. Is he prepared to take these sort of chances? It's a hard decision for him to make. I really hope it doesn't get to that. But I definitely can see how this would be all, negotiating tactic, essentially. Or at least used in a way that that also helps with the negotiation. Because the news that came out is that PSG and Chevalier had been talking since mid-season, and no one knows about it until 2 days before we do our last meeting with Donnarumma. Sure, yeah, coincidence. Yes, that's absolutely how it goes in football. It's all, luck and coincidence. So anyway, I'm not going to drift too far into conspiracy theory. We'll have to see, how all of those conversations better out. My personal opinion is somewhat balanced, and I'm very much going back and forth on this. It's annoying because I tend to always have the balanced opinion anyway. But yeah, I kind of want Donnarumma to stay because I like the guy, because I think he's a great goalkeeper in so many ways. He's helped us a lot, and he's really shown a bright light in the last 6 months. At the same time, I realized that we've had it for 4 years, and that essentially for 3.5 of those years, there's always been things to say about him and about his game, and things where he's underperforming. So I don't want to be blinded by the last 6 months, especially because I think that he's made progress, but I think maybe not as much as what people say. And I think that's where I'm reflecting a lot, because he hasn't made any mistakes in terms of his passing, and he's maybe improved his distribution a little bit. But at the same time, he's rarely done something that was completely out of this world. It's more that he's found easy workarounds that kind of work for him and that he can use consistently. So yeah, how much is it progress? How much is it just small stuff that's actually helping him? I don't know. The shot stopping has been spectacular, and the penalty shootout in Liverpool, but we kind of already knew that was his strong points, and he kind of showed that already. So yeah, at the same time, good guy, good influence in the locker room. He's universally well liked and respected. He seems to like the club, doesn't like French media, but likes the club, which makes him perfect for PSG. And so yeah, so one way or the other, like I think there will be plus and minuses. It's not an all white or all black decision. I think at this point it's mostly Donnarumma's decision to make because I think the club made it very clear how far they're willing to go, and so he's gonna take it or leave it. And if he leaves it, we've got a plan B who seems to have a lot of support and a lot of good reasons to come on board. We'll see if he actually lives up to the hype. But yeah, the club will go on. We lost Mbappe last year, and see where that got us. So we could very well look back in a year and go, oh my god, like Chevalier is the new Thibaut Courtois, and how smart were we to make the hard choice of pushing Donnarumma out when he was such a good goalkeeper to bring this guy in. Alternatively, we could also be sitting in a year saying like, oh, we need a new goalkeeper because Chevalier, what a mistake. You don't know how those things turn out. And I think in this case, yeah, it's a really, really, really difficult one. Anyway, like I said, we'll see how those conversations go on. I think like one way or the other, like the decision is gonna have to be made this week. I think, yeah, we're gonna have to have some clarity. Players are coming back to training week after. We've got Tottenham like staring at us right in the face. So we need to resolve this one way or the other. So that was it for me. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comment what you think and how you see this conversation evolving. I know everyone. I mean, we've talked about Donnarumma before, so I know everyone loves Gigio and would like to see him stay ideally. But yeah, given those latest conversation, what do you take from it? Are you leaning into the conspiracy theories like me? Do you think it's negotiating tactic, or like do you think it's really what's gonna happen and that we're gonna change goalkeepers? Let me know in the comment. Please drop a like on this video. Please subscribe to the channel. That's really super helpful always, and hit the bell to get notified for future videos. And don't forget, with whatever goalkeeper, ici c'est Paris!